This is CBC Vancouver News.
True reconciliation was never acted upon. We're suffocated from a true colonial process.
Tonight on CBC Vancouver News, a lot of hurt and confusion as the 4 First Nations and the Olympic Committee question the BC government's decision to not support the 2030 Olympic bid. Also, BC, the least religious province in the country. We hear from faith leaders and what they have to say about congregations declining in numbers, and a heartfelt and emotional message from the family of the RCMP constable killed in Burnaby in the line of duty last week. Good evening, I'm Zahra Premji. Thanks for joining us. A brazen attack has shaken U.S. politics tonight. The husband of Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, is in hospital after he was attacked last night. Police have identified the suspect as 42-year-old David Dupepe, and CBC has learned this evening he grew up in BC in Powell River before moving to the U.S. Police say Paul Pelosi was attacked in his home by a man with a hammer. Multiple reports say the intruder shouted, "Where's Nancy?" She was not at home at the time. Nancy Pelosi's office says her husband is expected to make a full recovery. Pelosi is one of the most powerful people in the Democratic Party. A warning tonight, the video we're about to show you contains distressing details. The actions of 2 Metro Vancouver Transit police are being called into question after video surfaced online depicting their takedown of a woman at the Granville SkyTrain station.
You're being release the taser!
The video was shared by a YouTube account that documents local police behavior. On Thursday, it shared the video which shows 2 transit police officers struggling with a woman wearing a red bra, dark pants, and only 1 sock at the Granville SkyTrain station. She can be heard telling them that she is not resisting arrest. At one point, the officers can be seen driving a knee into the woman's body. In a statement, Metro Vancouver Transit Police said officers responded to the Granville SkyTrain to reports of a woman suffering from an apparent mental health crisis and that she was, quote, chasing other passengers, screaming incoherently and removing her clothing. It also writes that using knee strikes and deploying tasers to restrain people are approved in certain circumstances where a suspect is actively resisting and displaying assaultive behavior. Benjamin Perrin, a professor at UBC's Allard School of Law, however, tells CBC via email that, quote, the police use of force model is fatally flawed when it comes to people with mental health challenges, and that it is cruel, ineffective, and too often deadly. The Independent Investigations Office says it is not currently investigating the video. Upset and confused, the 4 First Nations and Canadian Olympic and Paralympic committees are questioning the province's decision not to support their 2030 Winter Olympics bid. But as Janella Hamilton reports, the province says it considers the estimated cost of $1.2 billion simply too high.
True reconciliation was never acted upon.
Councillor Wilson Williams with the Squamish Nation was among leaders Friday, expressing their disappointment in the province's decision to not support a potential 2030 Olympics bid.
We know the potential this concept could have to create a new model for advancing reconciliation, to enact positive change in communities around BC and Canada.
The First Nations leaders say they would like a sit-down meeting with the incoming Premier David Eby to discuss the proposal and its importance.
This was the first time we're thinking of an Indigenous-led Games.
The tourism minister says she is open to an in-person meeting with the 4 potential First Nation hosts and understands their frustration. But with an ongoing pandemic and shortage of doctors and nurses marked by rising interest rates and inflation, she says the $3 to $4 billion price tag attached to the Olympics would be better spent elsewhere.
We made the choice to focus on our priorities, on healthcare, on education, on housing.
However, Chief Wayne Sparrow with the Musqueam First Nation says housing could be created with revenue earned through the Winter Olympics.
We have 470 odd band members in our community waiting for housing. We have drug problems in our own communities that are stressing each and every one of our communities.
Those are things we can work on with or without the Olympics.
At the same time, First Nation leaders are questioning why the province would move forward on plans to host the Invictus Games in 2025 and the FIFA World Cup a year later.
When you look at the size and scale of an Olympic bid, it's multi-city, it's multi-venue, the transportation and logistical complications of a bid that size is enormous.
Much like the original FIFA proposal, Indigenous leaders hope the province will change its mind before the International Olympic Committee's December deadline.
We're not going away. We will stand strong in order to have our voice heard.
Minister Baer, however, says the province's decision is final. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Vancouver.
Amid our ongoing healthcare crisis, the provincial government has unveiled a new urgent and primary care centre in Burnaby.
It will provide people in this community with increased access to team-based comprehensive health care that will include family physicians, nurse practitioners, nurses, social workers, clinical counselors, clinical pharmacists.
Dick says it will serve people who require timely health care but don't need to go to an emergency department. Recent estimates suggest 1 in 5 British Columbians don't have a family doctor. This is the 29th urgent and primary care centre in BC. It will open November 1st, operating 7 days a week from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. The federal housing minister has announced new affordable rental homes will be built in Delta for seniors and those living with intellectual disabilities.
Through our partnerships, our federal government is contributing nearly $35 million to build Evergreen Court, a new housing development led by the Affordable Housing Societies.
The project will have 130 rental homes. It will include accessible and adaptable units, and they say the project will also have parking, gardens, and common amenity space. It's expected to be completed by winter 2024. Rental rates are expected to be confirmed closer to completion. Fire officials are trying to determine the exact cause of a large house fire in Surrey last night, but say it may have started with a ruptured gas line. It happened at a home at the end of a cul-de-sac near Iona Place and 123A Street. A neighbor tells CBC they heard a loud explosion around 9 p.m., so strong that it shook the windows of their home. That was followed by several smaller explosions. Fire officials say there were a number of propane canisters on the property. 2 of the 4 people in the home were treated in hospital for non-life-threatening injuries. The family of RCMP Constable Shaylin Yang provided an emotional statement today. Yang is the Burnaby RCMP officer killed last week in the line of duty. Their statement reads in part, Shaylin was gentle yet brave, compassionate yet courageous. She was born with the gift of supporting and empowering others. She devoted her life to helping others, and she made the ultimate sacrifice to this work that she loved. While the family is asking for privacy in their time of grief, they wanted to thank the RCMP, her friends and colleagues, and the general public for their support. The RCMP will be hosting a regimental funeral for Yang at the Richmond Oval on November 2nd at 11 a.m. Well, the impacts of climate change are all around us. Droughts, natural disasters. The scientific community says we need to hit net zero carbon dioxide emissions by 2050 to avoid catastrophic consequences. People in BC and around the world have been protesting against governments that are seen to be too slow to act against climate change. But how much is someone willing to risk to fight for something they believe in? Our Joel Ballard spoke with local activists to find that answer.
It's been 2 years of devastation. Floods.
We had about 15 to 30 minutes to pack and go.
Raging wildfires.
A lot of people have lost their homes.
A heat dome.
She didn't know the dangers she was in.
Our planet is getting hotter. Human activity releases greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, causing weather patterns to change and wreaking havoc on the environment. By 2030, the World Health Organization predicts it will lead to around 250,000 additional deaths per year. In the face of this disaster, some are taking to the streets, demanding action. But it comes at a cost.
This is the right fight in the right place at the right time, and I was the right person.
Most of the time, I don't feel like I have a choice. It's about the collective protection of society from an existential threat.
I believe that we will win!
Climate activism can be found across BC. But in the fight for climate action, how much are people willing to risk?
I was sentenced to 30 days in jail.
Well, I've been arrested at this point 13 times.
These two men are fresh out of jail. They risked their freedom to call for a stronger response to the climate crisis. But why? For Tim Tuccaro, it all comes back to his training as a doctor.
Climate change is the #1 healthcare and public health challenge facing us.
An SFU professor emeritus in health sciences, Tuccaro has been active in protesting the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion for years.
I was at the end of my rope. I had done everything I could, participated in the hearings, written these reports, and it had absolutely no impact.
So as we protest this pipeline project.
So he moved to the streets and forests.
If we stop emitting, we can prevent these health impacts in the future.
Probably best known for his time living high in the sky, blocking the Trans Mountain removal of trees in Burnaby. At one point, spending 10 consecutive days, 35 meters in the air.
If you're in my line of work and nothing else is working, and you're trying to protect your children and future generations, you can go a long way, some of which may not be legal, but that you know is right. That's why I'm here sitting in a tree, blocking construction up to this point, but they're getting close, so please come and help me.
On November 20th, 2021, Tuccaro refused to come down from his tree sit. He was arrested, charged, and sentenced. Zain Huq's story is similar. The Pakistani national came to Canada as an economics student, his climate-focused civil disobedience spurred by government inaction.
There's no way to say that what we are doing is going to work, but what people have realized is that everything that has been done over the past 30 years has empirically, objectively not worked. He joined the groups Extinction Rebellion and Save Old Growth. They would block bridges and highways, glue themselves to roads, and demand an end to old growth logging in BC. That is a form of democratic engagement by non-violently causing a fuss and forcing this dialogue. In April, their activations caught the ire of drivers and attention of the government. The Ministry of Forests told CBC at the time, "We will always respect the right of peaceful protest, but disrupting other people's lives undermines the progress made to protect at-risk old-growth forests." While blocking tree clearing by Trans Mountain, Huq too was arrested, charged, and sentenced. But because he's in Canada on a student visa, his activism brings greater risk. I spent a few days in detention, immigration detention, and I was released. And my study permit was revoked, and I was found to be inadmissible in Canada.
Now he's in a state of limbo, at risk of being deported.
So we're going to the office of the Canadian Border Services Agency, where I have to report twice a week on Tuesdays and Fridays, because they suspect that I might be a flight risk.
And if you weren't to come here and if you weren't to check in, what would happen?
I would be in violation of my release conditions, and I would be taken into custody again.
Over the past few years, thousands of climate activists have been arrested across BC. And while activism can often achieve immediate results, like stalling the demolition of a tree, some experts say the greater impact comes from its message.
Civil disobedience is an act of public communication. It's a way of someone saying, I am so frightened or I'm so disturbed by an injustice that I'm willing to put myself on the line to try change your mind.
Harrison says activism can be effective, but it's a high-risk strategy.
I got kids in the car that are sick. Get the out of the road.
if you just aggravate the folks that you're trying to convince, it's not clear that it's accomplishing its goals and probably making things worse.
Ultimately, she says real change is going to take collective action, the will of the people, and courageous government policy.
It's up to us to fix it. And so do we have the courage? Do we have the guts?
We're outside the correctional center where both men served time. The memories still fresh.
They didn't give me shoes, and I had to get out of the van in shackles, in the rain, in my socks, just getting, and I was already cold.
Yeah.
So that was like, this is going to be very dehumanizing.
With the incarceration, the potential deportation, the financial costs, Huck says it's too soon to tell whether it was worth it. But ultimately, it doesn't matter because he never felt he even had a choice.
When our community is under attack, choice is a very odd thing to bring into the conversation.
As for Takaro,
was it worth it?
Oh, absolutely. I would absolutely do it again. I may have to do it again.
The risks and the consequences willingly accepted. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, is it time to celebrate Halloween on the last Saturday of October instead of having it every year on October 31st? A Research Co poll says 44% of Canadians agree with this idea, 39% disagreed, and 17% are undecided. The poll says Ontario and Atlantic Canada residents are more likely to support celebrating Halloween on a Saturday every year, but the proportion is lower in British Columbia. Are British Columbians moving away from religious traditions? We'll bring you more about that revelation from the latest census data coming up next. Thanks for sticking with us during our commercial-free live stream. In Ottawa, residents say a multi-million-dollar park and ride that opened 3 years ago in the Orleans neighborhood is useless because it sits almost empty. A park and ride is usually where you leave your car parked while you hop on a bus or train to get to your final destination. Priscilla Kisan-Huang has the details.
There's probably only 15-20 spots for cars right now to use at this park and ride that is not fenced off.
Riley Batista is standing on a largely empty cement lot near her home. The city cleared a forest to build this park and ride that she calls an
$8 million playground in the neighborhood.
Since opening in October 2019, kids rode bikes there, families played hockey, skateboarders used it too.
But at night, and actually you can probably still see some of it, there's cars would come and spin out in the parking lot at night.
She says that's why these fences were put up, blocking off a majority of the park and ride. Yellow signs posted around the fence admits usage is low. After visiting 3 times between September and October, CBC has seen 0 to 5 cars parked there, and many times by non-transit riders for recreational reasons.
We all feel the same. It's not being used. It's a waste.
But the city advertises this park and ride as perfect for those in South Orleans, claiming transit takes only 35 minutes to downtown from there. In reality, it can take more than an hour with only 2 regular buses and no express routes. So why was it built?
The park and ride was supposed to be part of this rapid bus corridor.
That intended rapid route would go through the Greenbelt and connect the park and ride to Blair Road. But that project has been discussed for decades and may not happen until well past 2030.
We were all quite enraged that we were going to have this cart before the horse parking lot put there with this glorified, it's a nice station, but a glorified transit stop.
The city maintains the location is strategic for that future rapid route, but residents say they want solutions now. A direct express bus to the LRT, for example, could take about 10 minutes. Priscilla Kisan-Huang, CBC News, Ottawa.
latest census data appears to show British Columbians could be losing their faith. At least half the province identified as non-religious. As Zahra Premji tells us, local religious leaders are split on how to interpret the findings.
No, it doesn't worry me.
For Reverend Carmen Lansdowne, the latest census data was less of a revelation and more of a confirmation of what she says has been a long-time trend. BC being ahead of the curve when it comes to secularization.
I think that people moving away from religious traditions has not so much to do with their spirituality or their faith, but has to do with a rejection of the harms that is caused by religious tradition.
Data released earlier this week shows more British Columbians identify themselves as non-religious, 52.6% specifically, compared to 34.6% Canada-wide. Archdeacon Douglas Fenton, however, believes the data may not be an accurate reflection.
The whole dichotomy between spiritual, I'm spiritual and not religious, or religious and not spiritual, is a false dichotomy for me, because I don't think that people are fully understanding or appreciating the question.
Father Douglas says churches all over are seeing declining numbers, but that does not mean lack of faith.
When we talk about who's religious and who's not, we're often measuring attendance at a religious place, a church, a mosque, or a temple, and not talking about the relationship that faith plays in an individual's life.
But BC Humanist Organization interprets the data differently.
Here in BC, we see people support science. I think we saw a lot of that in the trust placed in the public health officials during the early parts of the pandemic, in particular, the high uptake of vaccinations and things like that. And we also see a sort of secular spirituality, a deep connection to nature and valuing the environment.
Bushville believes the non-religious demographic will rise even further in the coming years. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Vancouver.
All right, here's a live shot of Georgia Street. Kuljeet will have your full forecast coming up next.
2 weeks ago, this Ford Taurus dipped its wheels in the Atlantic Ocean at Halifax. Today, 7,222 kilometers later, it ended its journey in the same way at Vancouver. Not much of a publicity stunt these days, except that 3 other Ford Tauruses made the same trip. Identical except for one detail. While one car drove on gasoline, the others made it on propane, methanol, or natural gas. A car magazine, World on Wheels, conducted the test partly to see which fuel is cheapest. And the winner is...
natural gas is not available, so I'll probably be driving propane in the short term. Long term, if I could, of course, I'd like to drive natural gas. It's cheaper by far.
The average cost for gasoline was 5.5 cents a kilometer. Natural gas was just 2.9 cents a kilometer, 48% cheaper. The trouble is there are less than 200 natural gas fill-up points in Canada. The fuel tanks use up the entire trunk. Converting a car to natural gas costs up to $2,000, and add $3,000 more if you want to fill it up at home using your natural gas outlet.
It's pretty pricey now, but I'm sure as we learn how to produce these things better, it'll be cheaper. Yeah.
Propane is also cheaper than gasoline, costing 4.4 cents per kilometer, 21% less. There are lots of propane stations around, but you still need that $1,500 conversion to save you money in the long run. People are paying the money.
As the price of fuel goes up, we've been really busy lately. I think we did about 4 last week, 3 or 4 the week before. It seems to be tied directly to the price of gasoline at the moment.
Within 5 years, you might not need to convert to propane.
Our initial engineering projections are that at most it would be $150 to $200 more for a vehicle that has the ability to run on a variety of fuels.
Alternate fuels are less polluting than gasoline, an important environmental concern. But it's the cost that will be the key. If they're cheaper, people will demand them. Bob Nixon, CBC News, Vancouver.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
On November 9th, join CBC British Columbia's Michelle Elliott at a free online UBC alumni discussion about decolonizing arts and culture. Register today at alumni.ubc.ca. And never miss an episode of your favorite CBC drama or comedy again with the free CBC Gem app. Check it out at gem.cbc.ca.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace, installing the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
All right, my favorite part of the night, let's check out what's happening with the weather. Let's bring in our weather specialist, Kuljeet Kaila. Kuljeet, I love rain. I'm not sure if you know that. Bring me more, please.
There is so much more rain coming. Today was a nice day. It was a calm between two storms. We had one on Thursday. We've got another one coming this weekend starting Saturday, and it's going to come along the coastline for Haida Gwaii, for Central Coast, the Lower Mainland, as well as Greater Victoria. We're going to get a ton of rain. Here's what the weekend is going to bring: 140 millimeters of rain just for Vancouver, almost 200 for the Tri-Cities. So you might want to go there, Zahra. 44 for Greater Victoria. Lots of wind coming as well. So I took those numbers, and here's what it looks like spread out over the next few days. Friday, like I said, today was a pretty good day. Tomorrow, 30 to 40 millimeters of rain. Winds are going to be about 30 kilometers an hour. Sunday is when a lot of rain is coming, and it'll be windy as well. And we'll get a bit of a cool down for Monday. It'll be easing up on the rain and wind just in time for Halloween. For our highs right now, heading into the next few days, this is the other thing that's happening. Temperatures are dropping drastically from double digits into Tuesday, where we're going to see single digits. 8 degrees for Vancouver, only 9 degrees for Abbotsford. So it is going to get much cooler. Tomorrow's forecast, we are going to see a mix of sun and rain, along with some flurries for Prince George, 9 degrees there, and 12 degrees in Victoria with that rain as well for Saturday into Sunday. Looking at the 7-day forecast for Greater Vancouver, like I said, lots of rain promised for the weekend. Halloween's going to get a little bit of rain, 20 millimeters for Tuesday, and the rain will continue now into all of next week. So you're going to have like an amazing week, Zahra.
All right, I think I'm going to throw the gumboots away and just grab a bathing suit and head out, Kuljeet. Thank you.
For sure. Don't forget the goggles.
Well, Halloween is just 3 days away, so kids are busy preparing their costumes and some adults are preparing to scare them. In fact, one homeowner is already doing that. Little trick-or-treaters and maybe even the grown-ups are no doubt horror-stricken by this sight. So far, local residents have been overcoming their fear and stopping to take photos and videos of the incredible display. Some are even making it a destination for their evening walks. Well, that's all for your late news tonight. And for those looking for the Canucks score, wait, if you aren't, plug your ears. Well, the Canucks beat the Pittsburgh Penguins here at home with a 5-1 win. Now, before you let that head hit the pillow, take one last scroll through the headlines at cbc.ca/BC. And hey, have a happy pre-Halloween weekend and have a great night.